All right, so we're going to dive into the story creator, and essentially any of these stories that you see here, you could pick up and add your own narrative on top of. Now, the degree to which that narrative is customizable varies, but we're going to go through sort of a basic orientation of using the story creator mode. So what I've done is on the Texas power outage, I made a copy of it already. And so that will show up here in my flows. And so I put DS in front of it to sort of indicate that it's a story or a flow story rather than a sort of self-guided walkthrough that has text instead of narration. So as it exists today, this flow, if I go into edit, has a series of steps, 21 steps, in fact, that it goes through. And on these steps, we're highlighting different or telling different components of a story, sort of very piecewise. And then in addition, on certain graphs, so as an example, I look at this graph, that this graph starts to play out over time. That's for different meetings, for different events, you'll want to highlight something or annotate it, change the camera position, drill into something, add sort of this story level component to it. But you don't need all of this, all of these details. And instead, you could pick it up off of someone else or to sort of riff off something someone else has created. So by clicking Create Story here in the top right-hand corner, the same flow will reload, but in Story Creator mode. And what Story Creator mode does is it gives you somewhat of the same optionality of having access to the editor, but it does so in a more graphical way, as well as you have the ability to add new steps, to add text into the display, to add annotations, update the camera position. And then we'll also go into camera preview positions, which I'll just quickly show before I start to dive in, because it's really helpful as you start to piece a story together, is to understand where the camera is at that point in time. So by clicking this camera position preview, you can actually see the specific step, or in some cases, series of steps where the camera is positioned. And to actually move to any one of the positions, it's as simple as clicking on the camera, and now you are in that center of the camera. So if, for example, on step 1, I didn't want the camera position to be there, but instead I wanted it maybe down here where 8 is. Actually, it doesn't make sense. Let me go over here to 16. And I'll make that the camera position. So now I'll update the camera. And so now on step 1, we'll see that step 1 and step 16 both have the same camera position. So this is very helpful for giving a sense of where things are located and how to adjust your own camera position to go to the right spot. Now, while I'm at it, since we're on this camera position step, the other one to note is mobile camera position. So by checking mobile camera position, you can essentially do the same thing, but in a portrait orientation. And the reason that both are set, so both the normal position as well as then a mobile position, is that because of the aspect ratio, you might want to zoom in further or be further back depending on the content. By default, it's always going to try to fit everything in the space. And so, for example, on this one, I might want to zoom in just a little bit more, update the camera position, and then as I go through this series of steps, I can essentially go step by step and continue to update the phone or the mobile camera position. And so that is, essentially how you do that. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to refresh real quick. And we're going to go into the main aspects that we wanted to dive into, which is adding narration. So we'll add narration to specific steps here. And in addition, we will add annotation texts where it is applicable. And then after that, we'll go through sort of how to share it with the world and go from there. So I already updated that first step. I have to change it back though, because I'm going to start from here. And the way you record is pretty straightforward. It's here in the top right-hand corner. Your browser will ask for permission to use your microphone. And it uses the default microphone of your browser. So you can always click on that icon and change the microphone to the most appropriate microphone, or alternatively, you can record separately, save it as an MP3 file, and then load it in this way. And so essentially, you are recording a narration track for each specific step. And as we continue to flesh this out, it won't be just audio, but it will also capture your movements. So as your avatar moves around the space to point to things, so too will that be captured. And so you can imagine a virtual sort of self, in some sense, presenting in this. And that's really more of the path that we're going down. So more and more will be coming down that. But as a very first way to start, we are adding in recording as sort of the base thing to do. So before I start diving in and actually going through this example, any questions about camera positions or recording?
Do you want to say just a few words, Mike? I don't want to take this too far off track, but camera position for AR and VR?
Yeah, great question. So there's the mobile camera position, the regular camera position, and in augmented reality, the camera doesn't matter. The camera can be anywhere it wants because the object of the scene will always stay in the same location. And that location is defined not in Story Creator, but within the Visualize Data tab. If you go to Settings, within Settings, you'll see definitions for AR center point height off table, as well as off of the floor. And so by default, it takes the 000 position of the scene and places that 1.5 meters above the ground. And so you're setting the ground position, and then it is moving it up that direction. The only other thing to note here is the scale in VR attribute. So by default in virtual reality, we actually scale the world by 3x so that everything's larger since you have more space to put things. But that's another thing you can adjust, and you can also even adjust the overall global scale of everything here. So this is how you adjust sort of global settings that impact augmented and virtual reality object positions. So not technically camera positions, but if you're going to film in AR, understanding where the object is in the scene is extremely helpful as you build it and test it. Does that address that question, Bill, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's a rich enough topic that maybe we'll have a separate session that really has to do with navigating flows in VR and AR and making AR videos. You know?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Cool. So, all right. So let's go back into Story Creator by clicking Create Story, and we will start to add in this narrative track for this flow on the Texas power outage. So let me go full screen here, and I'll click on Start Recording, and I'll start to present basically this first step. This is the 2021 Texas blackout story. So it's kind of shocking to some, but the Texas blackout in 2021 cost more than Katrina. So the magnitude of it, I think, is sometimes underrepresented or underheard in some sense. So anyways, I'm going to walk through this story. Stop. That was a little rambly, so I might actually re-record that. And to re-record it, I can click on Clear Recording. This will delete the narration from that step, and then I can add narration once again. So I'll start again. Add a preamble. Start one more time. We're going to look at the 2021 Texas blackout, which cost more than Katrina and impacted 200 or 20 million people. So then let's move on to the next step. So as we move on to the next step, we'll tell the next point of the story. So one important aspect to understand is that if the frequency of electricity drops below 59.4 hertz, it's actually causing damage to the system. In addition, you need to know that ERCOT's is its own power grid. So Texas is its own grid, and it has limited connection to the Eastern and Western interconnects. So I'm gonna, try to move a little fast here. So this last one. So we're gonna look at a few different attributes over time to zoom into what happened during this time period. So we'll be looking at temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, demand in megawatts, supply in megawatts, and the price of electricity in US dollars. Zoom in. So at a very basic level, it got cold in Texas. It typically, on average, is in the 50s, this pink line, and it actually went below freezing on the 11th. So it got cold. So I'm going to skip ahead here since I think you're starting to get the impression of how this works. The main things to understand about this is to play it back. We'll hit the play button. And so there you have the audio playing. So while you're in this mode, you won't automatically hear, you will automatically hear the audio come on in story creator mode, as well as in presenter mode. If you are in visualize data mode, or the regular story, or the regular editor, when you go step to step, it also will play the audio. So you'll always hear the audio, and there's not a stop button, but instead there is a mute button that is always going to be there. So you can mute the audio so you don't hear yourself on repeats over and over. But this way you know that for playback, the audio will be there for it. So from that, let me go back to create story. And I'm going to jump ahead just a brief moment here. And on this step, I want to both add some recording, but I want to add just a little bit more to the scene. I actually want to add some texts as narrative text, because right now this is all selectable. So if I click on this, I can see the percentages of each of these different sources and its contribution to the overall capacity of generation of electricity. And so to do that, I just simply clicked on add new text. So you can see this new text object here, text 80. And on this, I want to update it. So I will say, let's see, I think wind actually drops here down to like 60%, if I'm not mistaken, like 61%. So let me go ahead and go back to that text object, and I'll say wind at 60%. And what's sort of really nice about this is you could match the color. So I could have this match the color of wind so that it's more clear that this goes together. But in addition, you can add an annotation line. So by clicking annotation line and then select dot to annotate, you can actually select the dot that you want this to point to. And so here, there's a percentage sign there. Here we go. So here in just a few steps, I've added in some text. I'm going to make it a little smaller so that it fits in with everything else. I can click down here to actually get more sort of text options in terms of font size or font type and things of that nature. You can also, from this point, get straight access to the annotation lines. But anyways, you'll see this pink line, or sorry, this yellow line that's connecting the two in three-dimensional space so that you can more easily connect the dots for people. Now, in addition, as you have interaction capabilities built into the flow, those will also save per step based on what you have selected. So here, if I have this selected, if I go back a step, skip a little faster. So nothing is selected. And then if I go forward a step, you will see that that dot is still selected and white for that series for everything. So any interactions you have set up on the chart will also carry through in Story Creator. And so this allows you to do more drill-ins and more active filtering in some instances. And so I think annotations, in addition to updating the camera position and adding in your own voice, allows you to share something that's a bit different than just a self-guided walkthrough that has text over top of it, which you can see by clicking Show Step Overlays here in Story Creator. So this is the other option. I don't want to record my voice at all, but I just want to add some text on top so people can read their way through this. And so you can have all of these options. In fact, this one does have all the options sort of selected for it, where there is text that walks you through the story, in addition to now having some recorded voice that narrates the narrates the story a bit more. You'll see in the future, as we add more presentation-like capabilities, that will get further and further fleshed out. I guess the last thing to just note is to delete steps, that it does exactly what you imagined, which is to remove that step, and that you can always get it back, or not that you can always get it back, but you can add new steps by clicking Add New Step. And that might be applicable in scenes where you want to dive in sort of a level deeper, perhaps. So if I even go to the very end of this whole presentation that's on this step, I might want to drill in, and so I could add a new step and actually zoom into one thing and apply some filters. Looks like it might have just froze on me here, so I think it's still going, but let me just go ahead and refresh here. So I think that pretty much covers most of the main topics that story creators really used for. But I think in combination with building a flow, this is sort of the overlooked area in data analytics in some sense. It's the story on top of the data and being able to communicate that outward. And so there are a lot of people creating AR videos, which is very effective, but also a little more technically difficult to do. However, even presenting just like I am through sort of a background screen is another option. And then this option of adding your voice to it really adds that sense of presence, I think, even further. Mute myself again there. So I think that's about it. I think the only thing I might be missing here is you can reorder steps by simply clicking and dragging along this timeline, and that is how you can reorder stuff. So it's actually a pretty smooth UI there, and this the tiles, if you have a shorter flow, will be in the right aspect ratio as well. So let me pause there and see what questions you guys have, and Bill, if there are other areas here that I should be sure to cover.
Yeah, one question I have, Michael, is what is the relationship of an audio clip and a step? So is it possible to have an audio clip that traverses multiple steps, or is each audio clip associated with one and only one step at a time?
It is a one-to-one relationship, so one audio per step.
Okay.
We might have that more in the future for the transition period, but at this point we don't. Just to give you a sense of sort of how narration was working before, or how some of our customers were sort of scrapping it together in some sense, is within visualized data, so within the editor, in this 3 dots, you can actually go into audio. And from here, you can upload your narrative. And actually, you see here, these are the narration tracks that I actually recorded in Story Creator. So I can actually still access these recordings that I just did. And essentially what's going on is that in the step details, you'll see here that each narration actually has its own action. So the action plays that narration track. So before, people had to actually go into actions. You had to create a custom action that basically says to play that audio. And then you have to go to the step and say on that step, play that action, which then plays that audio. So as you can imagine, that's a very circuitous way to add narration. And so this idea of having a very direct way for someone to add audio directly to a step and be able to share that with as simple as just a link, that same link, the flow link, is sort of the intent there.
Okay, then I have one related question. So I'm on step 3, and I've got an animation time from going from step 3 to step 4 of 5 seconds. When can I start my audio? Do I have to wait till the animation is over and then start it? Or can I start it as I traverse to the next step, as I click the button to go to the next step, or what?
Yeah. Well, let me just see here. I think so I believe it's after the animation stops.
Yeah, it seems like that would be the safest. But what if you want to talk about the animation while the animation is happening?
Right. Let me.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to research this a little bit. I
Yeah.
can run some experiments, but I just want to know
worthy
if you might know the answer right off the top of your head.
Yeah, I need to test that specific detail, but I suspect that the way you would go about making those alterations is that within step details, you can apply an action per step. Okay. Yeah, so I think it's just 1-to-1. In the past, you used to be able to, you had the ability to add an action at the start of a step or at the end of a step. So you could have some audio go during transition periods. But I think we're trying to keep things simpler here to aid that. So for now, it's a 1-to-1 relationship. But what we're moving on towards, and you'll sort of see the hint here, is we're moving on to being able to build animations that are happening within the step, so that the animation's not about setting up one step and then having the second step to have it move between those, but instead that on the same step, you click a button or click an action and you see that animation occur, as well as anyone else on that step would see it too. So that's more of, I think, where this is moving towards, and how animation and recording audio over that animation will work in the future. So it's a little less dependent on the in-between steps and more focused on variables in the future.
Yep.
So Michael, I have a couple questions. Well, first I have a comment. I second Bill's suggestion on having a dedicated session talking about recording and VR and AR, and maybe even how you do what you do. Like in your Zoom session, you're talking about your flow, but you're in the flow, right? And that's not out of the box Zoom experience. You must have had some tricks. So maybe talk about that, because that's a really useful feature. Imagine if we probably have to anticipate some form of remote learning, and at least me, where I'm teaching, and they're pretty serious about whenever there are cases that I guess school closed, so you guys go remote learning for a week. So if I can do like teaching using this fashion, it really the experience is not too diluted in terms of the students being able to watch it. The question is that a question? It's about the workflow. I think I understand that right now, this story creator, you do still have to create your flow in the flow editor. You need to understand how to build that and all that, and right. Then you use this more like icing on the cake. You're adding narrations and drag and drop. But looking at it, it also it's kind of would be nice if in the future there's a day that comes that this can be like a more like a wizard or like an ease into type of an interface, where for people who finds the editor way too overwhelming to start with, maybe start with this type of interface and create a flow that have that sense of accomplishment. I mean, I'm thinking about my students. You know, they're ones that is going to be really struggling with the editor. That's why I'm thinking about I need to do this probably in the 10th grade, because it's a little bit too complicated for a middle school student. It needs to be high school, probably even higher there. So I'm just looking at this like, you know, like Unreal, or I'm thinking about some of the programming tools that I'm teaching. A lot of them have these like more like a drag and drop block based programming, or, you know, have a blueprint in Unreal, and then behind the scenes is actually C++ in Unreal, or, you know, Python and some other thing. And if you know, drag and drop is not meeting your needs anymore, you know, you can actually drop into that more advanced interface and do real coding. I think this, you know, in the future, if you go in that direction, I would be opening up a whole new market, or maybe different audience for this.
I love what you're saying here. It's spot on. Actually, the origin of Create Story was exactly that. A simpler interface, more for managers, or more for people that don't really need to set up everything. I think in its current instantiation, and actually we'll jump into this, a lot of the demonstrations we show, there's sort of build progression in some sense. You're seeing something change over time. And that's somewhat there. So we still have a few things to work on to make that a possibility, but we are trying to, in addition to making it sort of a simplified editor, also making it more of enabling people to respond and react, as opposed to just being a one-way dialogue. And so for someone to be able to click on a dots and add their own sort of take on the, you know, for this person that, oh, I lived in Texas and I saw that price hike, or my bill was XYZ that day, that little story can be attached into this. I think that starts to open up some really interesting dynamics, but to try to make this more of a conversation and less of a standalone visualization. I think hopefully resonates for you too, in terms of, you know, reaching larger swath of people that might not want, that the editor might be a little too much for, but they can still add their sort of narrative and special take onto.
What you said there, that is amazing. Using it as a collaboration interface, especially I'm thinking about in the case of AR, or, you know, specifically, you know, I'm thinking about in my classroom, if I have students in, you know, separate into groups and wearing HoloLens. And I've been thinking about it. That's a couple of things I want to talk about there. One is it'd be really nice to have this concept like an anchor. Like I say, you know, okay, so I know we're not truly everyone looking at the same hologram here, but if I have this flow, my flow is I'm going to anchor it in the middle of my classroom. I have some kind of a, you know, like a marker there, and everybody anchors their object. I've tried it, and it sort of works, but it, you know, it shifts a little bit. But if it had a more robust way to anchor it, and like you said, there's a way to actually interact, and you know, we all, you know, feel like we're talking about the, you know, collaborating on the story and developing it together. That would be amazing.
Oh yeah, it's there in terms of in sort of pieces, and we are trying to introduce it incrementally and really test it a lot. It is complicated, but we do have customers today that are doing exactly that in terms of having one piece of content that as you update it, everyone can see those updates. It's sort of a central theme. And the primary meme is actually in virtual reality. It's the primary mechanism. But what you're talking about is called spatial anchors as well, to anchor a space spatially for everyone, so everyone sees the same thing at the same time. And that's also something we're looking into, although I think it's a little further away than some of the other stuff. So I feel like you were all these these are like planted questions from Jason or something. That's exactly what he talks about. So.
No, it doesn't have to be. I know spatial anchor can get complicated. I've used other systems that require me to scan my entire classroom and inch by inch. That's really, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I'm not talking about the layout, all the 3D objects in this classroom. I'm just talking about this one chart in the maybe in the middle or something like that. It's maybe a simplified version of that.
I will say one cool thing about the HoloLens 2 is that QR codes work. So you can scan QR codes from the headset, which is great for flows in the sense that you can very easily open one by just having that QR code open up for them, and they could all join on their headset. So it doesn't anchor them, it doesn't anchor the scene to the exact spots, but at least allows people to enter the flow or enter the meeting a little more seamlessly. But yeah, I love what you're talking about, and it's definitely aligned with what we're trying to do. It's a bit of a balance of like leading tech that is still being developed, especially on the anchor side. But even as simple as just a QR code and having that be the center, and having that be recognized by by everyone in the scene, I think it's definitely in the spirit of what we're working on. So Stephen, I saw you had a question here in the chat window in terms of the timeline and how that's showing sort of this pause step. And that's the main thing I think is sort of missing actually in the flow, in the story creator mode, is that that filter capability is not 100% there, or at least the way we typically do it. And that's, we can dive further into that. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you, Stephen.
No, does my question make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Saying it's not possible basically right now?
No, well, not in the story creator mode, but in the regular flow editor, you can definitely set up these quote unquote pauses in time. So as a case example here, and I'm just turning off overlays. So let me go back to the editor here.
Here, this is my little thing that Bill helped me with. So like we can have it pause. Golly, I gotta zoom out, I guess. But we can have it pause like on any one of those years.
Yes. Yeah. And so to add a pause, essentially, if you take this step and duplicate this step on step 8, me not having seen any of those steps, it's fine. Just duplicate this.
I like keeping you on your toes, Michael.
I like it. And so actually, let's do one more time. Or actually, no, sorry. If you go to step 8, and on the swarm definition for swarm 3, which is, so not that, there you go. So on this one, if you were to scroll down and add in a filter, and you'll filter what I assume is year, most likely.
Yep.
And it does it in date range. You can actually just type into that field as well. It looks like it does the minimum to the maximum. So let's leave the minimum of, just update that second one to, 2010 or something. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And we'll also have to change that from an or to an and.
I think that's only if you have more than one filter.
I thought he had a level.
I saw what you saw as well. I think that was before he.
Is that right? Okay, this is the only. Oh.
Yeah, it's only one. But if there was more than one filter, then yes, we'd want that to be shown. And I think what is happening. So if you zoom out a little bit, we can probably get a better sense for what's occurring here.
Oh, you know what? Maybe Stephen, this isn't the same a chart we were working on a couple of nights ago, but I think in that when we were working a couple of nights ago, we did have a filter in there that was the level of the snapshot. You're just showing level 1. And I think you might have accidentally deleted that or replaced that filter. So I think what you need is an and where you're putting that level 1 back in for the hierarchy, and then you're also putting a constraint on the years to be shown.
Okay, so this would be an N.
Yes.
And then create new within that filter. And I think hierarchy level.
Oh, hierarchy level?
Yeah, I think what you started out was with hierarchy level equals 1. I think that's what we did the other night, and that got that working fine. Yeah, okay, great. And now what you want to do is create.
Phil, just before we move on, hierarchy level refers to when I'm in the data and I do those groupings.
That's right.
Yes, when you're doing a snapshot, if you've aggregated the
Okay.
hierarchy level. So this means you're just, you're getting the data you want there. And
Perfect.
then you want to add create new filter and then constrain the year if you just want to show the first 5 years of that chart.
Got it.
Yep. So he has that filter in, and you'll see that the domain also, I think, updated.
Yeah.
Where's domain?
The domain being, so if you scroll up on the width axis, if you change that from 2010 to 2020,
Oh, I see. Okay.
end date, then it will appear more of like a, and it's not in the, it's actually in the scatter plot definition. So underneath chart scatter plot, you'll see a width range, min 2000, max 2010.
Oh, cool. So it updated automatically.
Yeah, so it updated automatically, and that's sometimes
Great.
what you want, but then other times if you don't want that, so if you want it to show, if you put that back to 2020, I think is what it was. Yeah.
Oh,
so
so
now
yeah.
you can see it sort of like, here's a point, and then if you click the next button, it will animate to the next step, which is filling it all out. It looks like maybe the y-axis too needs to be, basically you want the domains to be the same if you want it to look like it's pausing. And by
Yeah.
domain, I mean the minimum and maximum of each axis.
Yeah, I think we had that min and max set to something like 0 and 50 or something.
Okay. But
So-
I could also just like with this camera angle, I could just duplicate this step and then make sure that the domains are the same and undo the filter.
You got
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's basically how you do the sort of stepwise, run through of it, which, I think will be in Story Creator one day, but it's sort of in the editor at least for now. But cool, great questions.
Little things, I've got to like put it all together. So
No, it's a lot. You're piecing a lot of things together, and yeah, it's cutting edge.
I didn't.
Cutting edge, but
I
not bleeding edge, hopefully.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear because I was kind of wrapping up dinner. But when Hal asked about how you have yourself appear through Zoom, like in the visualization, is that something we are able to do as well?
Yeah, so the it's technically really using OBS, which is Open Broadcast Studio. It's used by a lot of like streamers.
Okay.
It's basic software. We actually did release something called Flow TriCasts. I'll put that in the chat window. We're now it still works, and we do have people that still use it, but we haven't been working on that because we have a ton of other things that are sort of pressing. But we have instructions and how-to videos on basically how to get that set up. But we basically tried to make a really dumbed down, like a really simple version of it. That essentially it acts as a virtual camera, and that's essentially what happens there. So if you follow that link in the chat window, that should get you going at least.
Sorry, can you drop a link for OBS as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Cool. All All right, so I think that's pretty much wraps it up here for today. Hopefully it was interesting and really good questions. And yeah, anything else before we wrap up? Stephen, Hal, or Bill?
No, I just say, since Stephen and Hal are such veterans of these sessions, if you guys have any topics that you're just itching to find out more about, send us. If you can send that to me, and I'll make sure that Michael and I discuss it. And if it's a topic we haven't covered, yeah, we're very open to getting suggestions from the audience on this.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and catch you next time.
Bye, guys.
Okay, see you guys on email.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.